This is the Canadian National Anthem. And of course, you've interviewed him, haven't you, Michael Palin?
I did, yeah.
I never knew that. I was flicking around on the internet.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool opportunity, actually. He was in Hong Kong for an art exhibition at the, now I'm going to forget, it's right down at the Central Piers. They had an art exhibition, because I guess he worked for BBC for 20 or 30 years doing the travel documentaries, post Monty Python. And I guess he had a photographer named Basil Powell that was his friend, confidant, and went on every one of his excursions around to the 7 continents with him. And so they decided, since Basil Powell's from Cheung Chau Island on Hong Kong, that to do the global launch of his art exhibition, they chose Hong Kong Maritime Museum. That's where it was, Pier 9 or Pier 10. And he was here for a weekend launching the exhibition, and he sat down with me when I worked at HK Mag.
Okay, and just in case I was totally obscure, Michael Palin was the famous guy from Monty Python, who went on to become another famous sort of travel documentarian.
Yeah, he was in the movie A Fish Called Wanda.
That's right.
He didn't have a broad acting career after Monty Python. He was obviously in all of the movies, but was a founding member of Python, and I mean, what a dream job to travel around the world and just have a film crew follow you around. So I was pretty envious of him, but he was just wonderful, insightful, was happy to talk about any part of his career. It wasn't just, please don't bring up that Monty Python stuff. I couldn't bear it. It was just a lovely man, and
all right.
So that was...
Maybe we'll get onto that as we dig into your amazing career. Okay, let's start with one of my memories of you. I was in Macau, okay?
Yeah.
And I was at a kindergarten doing a clown show in Macau at a kindergarten. And one of the teachers said, "Oh, you work in Hong Kong. Do you know Sean Hebert?" So there you are.
Your kindergartner said that? No.
A kindergarten teacher.
Oh, a
so
teacher.
I was doing a clown show in Macau, and the teacher there said, "Oh, you're from Hong Kong. Do you know Sean Hebert?" So there you are. You're famous.
Yeah, it's one of my 4 fans in Macau. Great. Yeah, perfect.
She was very pretty.
Oh, that's...
Yeah, so it's good to know.
Yeah, that's good.
And am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Hebert?
Yeah,
totally
Hebert.
silent H.
That's right. Correct.
Totally silent. Alrighty. Briefly, in case there's someone on this planet, all my listeners, both of them, will be delighted to know. Is someone who doesn't know what you do. When people ask you, "What is your job, Sean? How do you make money?" What do you tell them?
Writer and comedian. That's on a good day. Yeah, on a good day, I could make enough money from creative endeavors to claim that that's my job. But you gotta hustle. I mean, I've bartended. I've worked as a magazine editor. I've worked as a teacher. From university all the way down to kindergarten. Worked in sales, marketing.
Let's go with writer and comedian.
Sure.
I like that.
Yeah, I'll take that.
And you can just about jumping everywhere make a living on a good day, good year.
I have, from time to time, but relocating, those are the tricky times. Like, if you can stay in one place, you can build that career, make it more likely as the months and years pass by.
I think we should get onto that. Hong Kong versus Canada, why you've moved back and forth, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Sure, yeah.
Very quickly, let's do a bit of very pointful, insightful self-promotion. Your website, is it SeanHebert.com?
You nailed it. That's the one.
And if you don't know how to spell Hebert or Sean, because that can be spelled many ways.
It's an awful name. It's SeanHebert.com.
Yeah, you got a hard name to spell her, because if you say it on the phone, they'll be like, "What did you say? Is it Sean with a SH?"
I spelled the entire thing. It's an Irish first name and a French-Canadian, an Acadian-Canadian last name.
I was looking at your website. It's fantastic. Really good. You've got a killer photo on your dates page. That black and white photo from the Hong Kong comedy competition.
Yeah, one of the
amazing
finals
photo.
of the comedy competition. That was a nice one.
That's a really classy photo. So go and look at Sean's website, SeanHebert.com, and if you click on the dates page, you see this amazing photo.
If you really look closely, no one's laughing. It's great. It's a great photo. Visually, it looks great until you look very closely and realize they didn't time it to a punchline. They timed it to just one of the lengthy setups that contributed to me not winning that.
Oh no! So don't look at that page. Yeah, you get the wrong idea. Life story. Let's go back to the beginning. You're from Canada?
Yes, the Toronto area.
Toronto area. Yeah. And parents. What do your parents do?
My father is a headhunter.
A headhunter.
Yeah, for the
not a tribal headhunter collecting shrunken heads.
No, it's a weird, obviously weird job title, but executive search agent. Yes. I think is. And my mother does a wide range of odd jobs, but when I was growing up, she was a stay-at-home mother and raconteur and entrepreneur and traveler. So and she continues to live that lifestyle today.
And maybe that's passed on to you slightly.
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe the entrepreneurial spirit, anyhow. Yeah.
Brothers and sisters.
I've got 6 brothers and sisters.
Whoa, 6.
Yeah,
wow.
We're not overly religious. I think we just. Maybe I'm not sure what the inspiration for that is, but yeah, it's a large family.
Are you oldest, youngest, in the middle somewhere?
Second eldest.
You're one of the big boys.
Yeah, the youngest is still just starting at high school now. Yeah. And the eldest is a university professor. Okay. So we have quite a range.
Wow. So, if you're one of the oldest, I guess your brothers and sisters didn't influence your career. Was there anybody who... What did you study at school, and what made you move on to the career that you've taken?
Definitely no part of my education led me to performing. I always liked performing. When growing up, I was in school plays. I hosted talent shows when I was at school. Did the morning announcements. Always had sort of a desire for attention and some performative elements. Did magic when I was a kid as a hobby.
So was that pretty much one of your main hobbies, performing?
Always.
Main interests.
Yeah, I once dreamed that I would do an acting program for university, and I think my dad knocked me upside of the head one time and said, that's a perfectly good fallback. You could always do that for fun, but maybe have something else that's more solid. Which was probably great advice.
So again, we have the interest in acting and performing, but we have the not really your father suggesting that maybe it's just a backup plan. So how did you? Were there any turning points? How did you end up where you are today?
Well, I mean, obviously, as I just was saying, I've got tons of backup plans in terms of making money when performing doesn't do the trick. So it's not a bad idea to have a wider range of interests and get some skill sets beyond that. But it always just seemed to appeal to me. I once did a job when I was in university. So I studied political science when I went to undergraduate. And even the performative elements of that, would run for student government, was always part of kind of leadership stuff. But not necessarily because I just liked the speaking in public. I liked
similar to me
campaigning.
Similar to me because I was at university, and when I was thinking about what I'm going to do after university, I thought, well, maybe I could be what in England is called a barrister, who's the lawyer who actually speaks in court, performs in court. He's a lawyer who goes up in
barrister and solicitor.
Yeah.
I wrote the LSAT, which is our North American exam for law school. I had a similar idea. Went on to teach. So the funny through line is at all points there's standing in front of a crowd, right? So whether it's children, whether it's a jury, whether it's literally as part of a show, I always kind of had an idea that I wanted to be up in front of a crowd. Not because I'm so desperate for attention and it's the only thing that kind of gets me out of bed. It's just something I enjoy doing, and felt from a younger age I was pretty good at it. And I remember I think when I was 10 years old, I made the finals of a school speech competition and kind of had the inspiration to try to make the speech funny. And even from that age, kind of thought, well, this is pretty cool. This was a good way to get attention, a socially acceptable way to get attention. And so when I was in university, I was offered a job through a marketing company who had seen my resume and saw that I had put at the bottom of my resume that an interest was stand-up comedy. And I think they interpreted that as my interest in doing stand-up comedy. Of course, the interest was just an insatiable appetite for listening to and watching stand-up comedy. And so they called me in to audition for a game show host job, which was a marketing campaign where you travel around the country in Canada.
There it is.
Oh, you already had that. Yeah, that all lined up as a question. Yeah, I kind of went in and...
Was that your job after university, your first job?
It was 2 summers during university.
Yeah.
So it was, I was able to leave school and do it for about 3 or 4 months, where it was, I drove the truck, I would phone the fairgrounds.
I've got a vague idea what this is, but let's tell people properly. So what was your job? You were...
So I hosted, the first summer I hosted a game show called The Fun Show, which was for a candy company in Canada. They were launching some new 3 or 4 different types of candies, and they wanted to put on a live stage show at malls or at summer festivals where you would come and watch a game show that was happening, but the entire thing was just a ruse to like give people free samples of candy and to drop the name of the candy as often as possible. So I had a logo on my shirt, I had a logo behind me, we ran this sort of trivia type show, but it was just a vehicle to get the name of the brand out, right? So it's, I mean, experiential marketing kind of thing. So they had me come in and audition, and they'd sent me a script, and I thought the script was awful. Like, it was supposed to be kind of this show that would appeal to all, you know, a family comes by, the kids would think it's interesting, the adults would think it's interesting. And so they had this kind of goofy script, and I came in the day of to audition, and the guy next to me in the audition was in the movie Billy Madison. And I guess he was sort of chatting with all the other guys in the audition. They're all actors, I guess, and they were all kind of bragging about the things they'd done. And I said, and yeah, you know, who are you? And I'm nobody. I've done absolutely nothing. I did a couple school plays, whatever. And I guess I'd gone in and said, if you guys don't mind, I'd love to go off script here. Like, I read this seems fine, but like, you know, this seems like the kind of thing I might need to improvise because I'm bringing people out of the crowd. And they said, hey, you know, go for it, do whatever you got to do. And I kind of just improv like a 30-minute game show with the people in the company.
Sounds like the kind of the fact that you're a beginner and a newbie. There's the kind of thing a beginner and newbie might say, yeah, why not just... I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Yeah,
I've never been in an audition. I didn't realize I was supposed to stick to the script. Well, then they said, you know, they felt like they had screwed up themselves by saying they should have gone after people to say, hey, feel free to kind of muck it up and improv this. And so I ended up getting it and was pretty well in over my head. And but it was the best, you know, it was like it was like doing a master's degree in performing, because every single day of the summer I'd perform for 8 hours.
Wow.
So I had a wig, I had a 3-piece suit, I'd be in the beating sun, you know, 25, 30 degree sun, just sweating. I think I lost about 30 pounds of water weight.
So some of these were outdoor shows, not inside the shopping centers?
Right, just out in an outdoor festival. We do them in the mall sometimes, and it was from 9 a.m. to 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. sometimes. We'd do a show every 30 minutes. We'd come up, and we had people in front of the stage giving out candy and throwing candy, but it was all improvised. So I had kind of a shtick I'd do at the beginning, and I'd be my own announcer, and I'd bring myself up, and I had a character name. I was Bob Funnerson, and I'd have to bring people out of the crowd. Sometimes it would be elderly people, children. I had a guy come up and didn't realize how drunk he was when I had him up. And, you know,
what did he do?
Well, I mean, generally, we would, since it was colorful and it was a candy company and there were children in the crowd, I would try to limit people from swearing or doing anything too risque, but I was always trying to balance that fine line of being kind of goofy enough and kiddish enough that the little kids would stick around, right? Like yourself, a clown, like be very energetic and over the top, but also kind of slip in some little punchlines that the adults would think, oh yeah, that was for me,
That's what I do at birthday party shows. I have the funny visual stuff for the kids, but some of the verbal stuff is good for the adults.
Exactly, and I'm sure a few times I crossed the line here or there,
me too.
And we would... you know, we'd have the client come in from the candy company, and they'd say, you know, really rein it in here, Sean. That, you know, that guy over there is our boss, right? So it was a fun job, but it was exhausting. We literally we built the stage in the morning. We'd set it up. We'd interview and hire the staff that would be with us for every single city. We'd drive the truck overnight, city to city. Like, it was.
And you did this for 2 summers.
Did it for 2 summers.
And you're doing. So you said so many 8 hours a day?
Yeah, at least. Well, the days would be like 14, 16-hour days, because we'd have to come in the morning.
So you must have learned pretty fast. I mean, after a week of that, you must have felt really seasoned, even after just 1 week.
Definitely by the end of the second summer, I mean, I was quite familiar with approaching a venue, you know, assessing what you need to actually run a show, making sure everything's set up. You know, are the mics working? Are the lights working? as I say, it was like doing a master's degree in like creating a show from scratch every day. The second summer we did we worked for a granola bar company, and it was the Fiber One Believer tour, and we had like a believer lever, and I played instead of a game show host, I played like almost like a evangelical, like kind of religious, like motivational speaker type guy, where I'd be out in the mall kind of with like a tight shirt on and a microphone, and, trying to get people to, we're looking for true believers today. We want you to come over here, and if you try this granola bar, believe me when I tell you it's healthy, and believe me when I tell you, it's got, whatever the hell it was, 12 grams of fiber, and if I could make them a believer on the microphone, they would pull the lever, and it was, we're going across Canada all summer trying to make all Canadians believers in the Fiber One, it's like, again, it's you're a corporate shill. Yeah. But at the same time, to be on a microphone for literally 8 hours a day, it's like being an auctioneer almost. Like you just, like speaking of that speed, and there's sort of a performative element.
Did you have to do a lot of the logistical stuff, or was there quite a big backup crew to help you?
Initially, I was sort of just the performer, and then by the end of the second year, I was sort of the coordinator of the program. So we would be picking the venues, and I would be the one in the morning that would phone in, make sure security could let us in. They'd show us to the spot. I'd say, maybe this is not going to work.
And so what did you learn? If there's someone you never know, there might be someone who's just starting got this gig coming up the next week. Did you learn anything in particular about that?
I mean, I think what you learn is that it doesn't matter what, in any show, it doesn't matter if you're setting up the show, if you're the one building the stage, or if you're the one, creating an audience, or you're the guy somebody's putting makeup on you, and you just get on the stage and they give you the mic. Something will go wrong. Anything could go wrong at any point, and it's the responsibility of everybody who's working the show to kind of be flexible. Yeah. And there's no room for divas when you're on site 16 hours a day and you're performing. If you're tired, you're always tired. Yeah, it's hot. Yeah, it's hot for everybody. You don't have enough food, you don't have enough water, you don't have enough of anything.
So adaptability.
Well, sure. I mean, and that's something you learn.
Going with the flow, enjoying the mistakes, maybe.
I mean, I'm standing at a mall. There's absolutely no control over the crowd. Somebody wants to come up and grab the mic out of my hand, it happened. Somebody wants to come up and throw up on our set, it's happened, right? Somebody's drunk, a little kid runs in. We had our set light. It caught on fire during a show.
You're not working in a theatre, so your setup time is very short, and you haven't got all the facilities that a theatre will have.
No, we had like a ridiculous amount of wiring in this wooden box. Like, we were in the middle of a mall, so we had wiring contained inside of a box, and at one point I had, I'm not a trained, like roadie or whatever, and I had bought the wrong power bar, and I plugged in like 19 things, like a Christmas Vacation style, like plug in a million things in. And I was talking to a guy, this was in Edmonton, and we were at the mall, and I'm saying to the guy, what do you think of the granola bar? And he turns around and he says, no, that box is on fire. And I said, well, you're on fire, buddy. Like, what do you think of the granola? And he realized, he says, no, really, that thing looks like it's on fire. And I turn around, and there's smoke billowing out of our set, like just this painted yellow box, just black smoke coming out. And, it's like in the middle of a show, you got to stop and be like, oh, okay, show's over, guys. Like, there is a fire here. We had our set collapse in Montreal one time. Thank goodness it was not during a show. But we had a gigantic setup for our game show where we had our Vanna, quote unquote, our Vanna White would be sitting in this sequin dress, and she would kind of roll around.
Vanna White is the name of the character.
Vanna White's the woman on Wheel of Fortune for decades that would touch the letters, right? And so we would hire our own Vanna, and so when I would say, it's history for 300, Vanna, and she would turn around the question, and we had this gigantic board, and it weighed about 600 pounds, and every morning we'd have to install it on the stage. We have to take it down, put it in the truck so it wouldn't get damaged and stolen. And we were in this old street festival in Montreal, and of course it was like maybe 6 or 7 story tall buildings on either side. Yeah. Windy day, and it had created this wind tunnel kind of in this street festival. And we just finished a show, and I'd come off the stage, and I'm handing out samples of the candy to the people right after the show, and all of a sudden just it goes whomp, and you hear this massive sound, and people scream in the festival, and I turn around, and our whole setup, our whole stage had collapsed. But I mean, 5 minutes earlier I had like children on the stage. Oh God! And and here like we dodged this bullet, but of course we had to shut down the show. People had just seen this stage
it's kind of frightening if you do something full time for a lot of stage hours, things do go wrong. Even if it's only
Everything.
1% chance. If you've done 100 shows, then on average, one of those shows is going to have one of those 1% things go wrong. I've had
course.
things like I finished the show. I was putting the saddle off my giraffe 6-foot high unicycle.
Yeah.
And quite early on in my career, I hadn't quite realised what was going to happen. I pulled the saddle off, and the rest of the whole pole of this metal pole, 6-foot high of metal, just goes swinging down and just misses the birthday kid by about 2 centimeters.
Yeah, and I mean, thank goodness nobody ever got hurt, or, you know, like we had people on stage and their podium would collapse, like in heavy, like stuff's heavy, you know, you built a stage, and again, it just shows you that, you know, you have to be on your toes, you have to be able to be flexible. You know, I'm not up there with a script, as I say, it's like, as things happen, you kind of got to roll with the punches, and the same happens in a stand-up show. If you're hosting, you know, anything, and something can happen, the mic cuts out, you know, the lights stop working, you get to a venue and nothing's right, you don't just say, well, you know, I don't perform under these conditions. It's like, you get it done. You get it done, and that's how.
I find sometimes it can be. Sometimes the show's really good under difficult conditions. Sometimes.
I mean, I did a show in Toronto a month ago where the mic cut out, and it wound up being like the biggest. You know, I kind of ad-libbed a line as a result, and it was the biggest laugh in my set. It's like you don't necessarily know. You know, it's the fact that it was ad-libbed and the crowd knew it. Kind of, I'm sure, was one of the reasons why they thought it was so funny, because obviously I couldn't have prepared for that.
Yeah, they know it's not prepared.
Exactly, and so, you know, the ability to be flexible and roll with the punches in any type of performance is serves you, right? It's kind of like that's your schooling. Is, you know, a seasoned professional has done everything.
You have 2 summers of this where you're learning a lot, and you're finishing your political science degree. In Canada. And then you're going to finish your degree and get a proper job. Was that the proper job in inverted commas? Was that the idea or not?
No, I was going to go to graduate school and wound up deferring because, you know, I'd been in school for 20 years, whatever, you know, since I was 5 years old, and I had some friends that were going to teach overseas in Korea. So they said, you know, it sounds like a good thing. They're offering a lot of money. We've never, you know, growing up with 7 kids in your family, we didn't travel much when I was a kid. I had barely been on a plane, never mind left the continent. So, you know, I had some friends saying, this is something we'd never done. We've never traveled before. Why don't we go off and, you know, school is there when you come back. You can always do that. And so...
so you traveled to Korea?
To Seoul, yeah. Got a job.
As an English teacher?
As just a typical white man move.
Well, this is me as well. I finished university, had no idea what to do. I ended up teaching English as a foreign language in Singapore. Yeah,
absolutely. And you never know where your life's going to take you, right? And that was... I'm grateful I took that opportunity. I did end up going back afterwards and continuing and going to grad school, and I mean, I'm not sure how much that experience served me. It maybe did show me that you know, I always say, if you can do something and find out that that's not what you want to do with your life, that's just as valuable as going in and finding out you do want to do something else, right? And so I kind of went back home and realized that I wanted to be anywhere but you know, sitting in a grad department and TAing and grading papers, and you know, waking up at 6:30 in the morning to tutor, you know, a bunch of depressed, hungover 17-year-old cynical kids who don't want to learn about Canadian or American politics or political theory or whatever. Again, a great experience. I got to teach. I was in front of a crowd, and that was fun for me, but continued to kind of push me to go back and do the things I was looking to do. So
did you finish grad school?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I did, I studied comedy.
I
studied political satire. So I went back and was doing a political science.
So do you have a master's in political satire?
Essentially, yeah.
Wow.
I did a thesis project on the power of satire to change the way the mainstream media covers politics.
Fantastic.
So I studied like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, who, you know, in the U.S. are now household names. But at that time I had to really talk people into letting me study that as a legitimate avenue of academic study. There was a lot of sort of skeptics that was anything that would... you know, it's funny, even, you know, nowadays people kind of regard those guys as important contributors to the political discourse in the U.S., but even... It's 2009 when I started that project. people were pretty skeptical. I had to get a lot of signatures from people that say, yeah, okay, that's something you're allowed to study.
So 2009, 2010. When did you finish your graduate work?
Finished coursework in 2010, 2011. Yeah. Defended the thesis in 2012, and the week I defended it, got on a plane and left Canada again. Went to backpack through South America for a few months, and then got on a plane from there and went to Hong Kong.
And that's where I first pretty met you.
Yeah, pretty well. I'd never been to Hong Kong and had some friends
So is this where your stand-up career begins, in Hong Kong?
Pretty well. I mean, I'd kind of dabbled, obviously was extremely interested in comedy and had studied it and was around it. The comedy club in Canada, Yuck Yucks, that's sort of the biggest name in comedy in Canada, was a sponsor of that game show that I hosted. So I used to get free passes all the time. And so I was always around comedy, but it was Hong Kong that I decided, okay, I'm going to go, 4 or 5 nights. I'm going to go to comedy clubs. I'm going to hang out. I'm going to meet the club owners. I'm going to do this as a full-time thing. Because I'd kind of just circled around every type of performance. I'd played music. I sang and done I've done all kinds of stuff on stage, but I'm like, truly the thing I'm interested in doing was stand-up. But I was so terrified of going in and finding out I was awful at it that I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. And I shouldn't have, but in a way, I'm a believer that things happen kind of for a reason. Maybe it's a spiritual kind of thing, but I think...
No, if you open your mind and you open up the possibilities, things will happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always was interested in comedy, but wasn't sure I had anything to say.
And Hong Kong, pretty perfect place to start, because the scene was, in 2012, it was growing, but it was still quite new.
Yeah.
Still fairly friendly. Great, not too much pressure.
Yeah, I mean, mostly friendly, definitely growing.
The cliques are forming, but...
Yeah, but it was also,
a great place to start. And I mean, easy to get... the main thing is easy to get stage time, wasn't it? Relatively easy.
It was easy to get stage time, especially as somebody that kind of had been around stages before, right? So that was helpful. It was not like a trial by fire. Like I was thrown into stuff pretty quick.
Because I remember you going on a stage... And I saw you the first week you did a 7-minute set, and the next week I saw you did a whole different 7-minute set. It's like, wow, this guy, how come he had so much material? And you said, Ben, it was a lot of hard work. Were you working like crazy in your free time in those first few months in Hong Kong?
I'd spent I'd been, even though I wasn't performing, I was writing jokes for years. So I had this kind of, a file on my computer of stuff that I'd been writing since university.
Yeah.
And so when I kind of had the opportunity to go in and go to an open mic and do a set, and I got a good response from it, and then Jami, the club owner, said, come in next week and show me some different stuff. And I thought, well, I don't have different stuff. That was the first time for any of that stuff. And then I just kept going into that file, and it was like, just pulling water out of a well.
Well, this is his synchronicity and things opening up just by chance. My next question is, how do you rehearse and practice? And this is sort of what we're talking about. How do you go about writing your material? You had a big file of stuff you collected over the years.
Yeah, I'd had a file.
How do you turn that into a set? Or do you?
Well, I think it's changed. I mean, now it would be different from what it was then. Yeah. Then it was just, I was reading it frantically, like, what doesn't suck? Like what here, seems like coming out of my mouth, it could turn into something that was
it's
funny.
hard though, isn't it? I find, because I read it at home and I think, what doesn't suck? Okay, this sucks, this sucks. And then I go backstage and I realise that a lot more stuff sucks. And by the time I'm on stage, I realise that actually everything sucks.
Right.
Sometimes your criteria of judging gets higher and higher as you get closer to the stage time.
Yeah, when I started, I thought a lot about wording and concepts. Like, it was always about, what idea do I have that I kind of have an interesting take on?
Yeah.
Where, that's a funny approach or whatever, or that's a funny turn of phrase, or that's a funny joke or whatever. And nowadays, that's not really. I don't get excited about material because it has a funny approach. I get excited because it has a funny, there's something sticky in it in the way I get to perform it. Like, if I figure out a way that I get to do a character through it, or I get to...
So you're interested in the performance, the
performance,
characterization?
Yeah, because to me that's what makes it exciting to try. So for me, if I have a bit of new material and it's, I really want to talk about this topic, I don't think it's enough for me to say, I have a really funny perspective on Donald Trump or something.
Yeah.
It would be, would I have that's a bad example. I don't have a joke about Donald Trump. I'm not interested in talking about that. But at the same time, if I had like a great impression of Donald Trump, that would be, to me, a far more interesting incentive for me to go up on stage and do that, because what through that performance can I channel that will get the crowd to connect with the material? That's what I'm more looking for now when I'm working on stuff.
But people can probably find you on YouTube.
There's stuff on there, yeah. I'm
because
pretty, I'm pretty energetic. I'm pretty,
I can remember you being on stage with your face bright red, your veins popping out of your necks as you really got into your emotions and rage with your octopus card, people trying to pay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's
octopus card's a card for tapping to pay for things. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that bit was, I used to close with that bit, and that was, I like that it's a performance. I mean, for me, I came from something that was much more performative than some people would consider, a lot of styles of stand-up. Maybe like older fashioned kind of, you look at a guy like Robin Williams, he's, or Eddie Murphy, these guys are, they're all over the stage performing. To me, that's sort of more the style that I'm interested in bringing onto the stage, rather than sort of standing there and being, more monotonous.
Wisecracking.
Yeah, give it a kind of deadpan. Yeah, here's a joke. Let me hear another
you're right.
quip.
You've got that whole other element that entertains by being so emotional, and the acting, the performance, the physicality, the emotions. You've got a whole nother level that you can entertain the audience with, not just the jokes.
It's like I had trouble for a long time to get away from my background as like a very broad. I mean, interesting. I mean, you do children's performance. You do clowning.
I have way the same problem.
And when I first started, I saw a lot of similarities with, like, I would do a voice when I get on stage, like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd watch a video and I'd be like, why am I talking like that? Like, why can't I sound more normal? And then I'd be like, well, stop being so hard on yourself. You spent years doing like a much broader style of performance. For children, for families, right? And so to expect that I'm going to come on and just have a very comfortable ability to just speak as myself and think that's going to be funny, it's a lot to ask. It's taken me years, and I'm still not there. I still work on, going back and watching a set of myself and saying, yeah, that sounds more like if I'm sitting having a beer with friends, that's how I might tell a story, right?
Yes. Oh, God, I don't like to talk all about me on the podcast. Shouldn't be about me, but I have exactly the same issue, because my full-time job is a full-time clown, and that's what pays the bills. That's what I do. I love it. So whenever I go on stage to do stand-up comedy, do I push the clown side? Because when I feel most natural is when the condom's on my head, and I'm doing this trick where I put a condom on my head and I blow it up, which is basically just a clown act for adults.
Yeah, it's different. There's nobody else taking that joke on the comedy show.
Not at the moment, but apparently, who was it? Howie Mandel used to do it apparently, a long time ago.
But the condom,
the condom on head. Yeah, I've never seen it, but apparently.
Have you seen Howie Mandel's stand-up from back in the 80s?
Well, again, he was a clown sort of guy, wasn't he?
He was extreme. I mean, very, very animated, but playing a character. Like he was not himself. No. He was. It almost hasn't aged well. He's playing a buffoon character. Like it's almost like playing kind of like Curly on the Three Stooges. Yeah. But today, watching it, you almost think he's making fun of mentally handicapped people. Like it almost doesn't age well, that style, and yet it's a very old style.
Yeah.
But he's playing like a buffoon. Like he's playing somebody who has an IQ of 40 kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's
but very broad. He's wearing, suspenders.
He's often wearing practically a clown suit.
You're exactly right. He's got, sometimes he even has face paint. He's putting, pies in his face. So it's that's this exact style where how do you turn that into I got married the other day. And,
I know.
I'm now starting.
I know.
How do you turn those two things into the same
sometimes
act, right?
so I have the same thing when I'm on stage. Which way do I go, and is it worth going in a more acceptable stand-up comedy direction? Whereas actually most of my professional life is making money doing clown shows. But anyway, interesting.
But it has to be true to you, right? Like
it is true to me.
Yeah, the voice has to sound like if me screaming and sweating and jumping around felt like, that guy's not like that, right? I mean, like, I'm trying to exaggerate what I'm actually like, and stand-up lets me do things that I wish I could do all the time. I wish I could scream at people when they're walking too slow in front of me. That was an energy that when I lived in Hong Kong I had. I don't have it anymore now that I live in a place where that stress doesn't exist for me. But those were jokes about things that I was hoping people in Hong Kong would connect to, which is the urgency, the impatience, right? And so that was my exaggerated energy of the moment. But that has to be in me, right? People have to believe, like, oh, geez, this guy really... There's a side of him that's really angry, that really wants to get out. Or there's a side of him that's super goofy or wants to do that stuff. Otherwise, it doesn't ring true. It's like if you're doing open mics and you're trying all these different things, and sometimes you try something and it isn't you. And sometimes you try something and you realize, wow, that really did connect with the crowd. I didn't even realize that was in me. And, that's kind of the... that's the experimentation of performance, right?
So I say, comedians, finding your voice. That's what the stand-up comedians say. Finding it.
Yeah, and you're not going to find it looking in the same place over and over, right? It's like you're going to find it by trying a bunch of new stuff, and you'll bomb out a bunch of times. But again, it's just as valuable to find out what's not your voice as it is to find out what is your voice. Right?
Yeah. Any tips for me, Sean? Any tips for me?
Keep going. Keep trying. Try being more of a clown, and then try being not a clown at all. Right?
See what happens.
See what sticks.
I mean, there were times in my career, like when I was at secondary school, when I was doing school plays, it was a very different style of performing.
Right.
Theatre performing. You weren't shuffling around. I wasn't jumping all over the place, but clowning, there's a lot more jumping around. Most stand-up comedians, though, they don't shuffle around as much as I do. They don't. No. I watch them. I watch them stand still. I think it's a bit distracting to shuffle around quite so much as I do.
Sometimes it depends on the size of the stage. I've had the opportunity to work like a much larger stage before, and was very conscious that if I don't use the space, that looks weird. You can take a
stroll all the way around the stage. That's a good idea.
Whereas I've seen people that are pacing on a 2-foot wide stage, and you're like, do you really need to be? You're not Chris Rock on like on a theater show here.
No.
Like, you don't need to pace it, on this tiny stage. So, you kind of need to work your movement through to again be adaptability, right? You gotta work this show one way and work another show another way.
All right, let's talk about a few quick questions. How did you support yourself financially in Hong Kong?
All different types of work. I mean, as I went through with comedy, there were times when money was coming in in a pleasant way through comedy. I never fully supported myself with comedy.
No, you can't yet really in Hong Kong. Even someone like Vivek, it's only about 50% is some kind of standing and performing.
Yeah, and even the population is like 90% Cantonese speaking. So if you're not speaking in Cantonese, there's only so much money you can make.
That's right.
So, I was working as a freelance writer.
You got a job with HK Magazine, didn't you?
I did get a job as an editor at HK Mag, which is the free What's On lifestyle magazine around town. And that was great. I actually got that job essentially hired off the stage at Takeout Comedy. So
Brilliant.
That was... They were looking to add humor to the pages of the magazine, and I used to do a lot of jokes about kind of Hong Kong news, Hong Kong culture, Hong Kong versus China, and they said, you kind of have a finger on the pulse and like satirical stuff. Can you write?
And there you are.
There
you studied political science. You've done you're a good writer, so easy for you to step into that job writing for HK Magazine.
Sure, and that's where you're not going to have an opportunity fall in your lap sitting at your house, with your dick in your hand. Nope. So, pardon my language here, but so you go out to the comedy clubs and you do jokes, and you have no idea who's going to be in the crowd. So that was just lucky, I guess.
Oh well, I think actually no, you stood out because you were covered by Time Out, Mirth Plus, More Magazine, HK Magazine. South China Morning Post, and even the
should
Philippines
say-
Airlines In-Flight magazine covered you.
I was in the Philippine Airlines In-Flight
So
magazine.
you
I covered myself in HK magazine. Let me just say, I did great work for my own career by promoting
Brilliant.
my own comedy
Why not?
shows. Well, yeah, why not? Whatever, it's not, there's nobody's gonna like put my feet to the
Did
to
you
the
feel
fire
you were
for
in the
that.
right place at the right time to get so much coverage in the press?
I think I was a big reason for my own coverage. I think I tried to create more press around comedy, knowing that it would not only serve the comedy scene, but it would serve myself. I mean, I did a whole issue on comedy during one of the festivals for the magazine that claimed that stand-up comedy is on the rise in Asia, not just in Hong Kong, and I truly believe that is. I think there's ebbs and flows in certain scenes, and maybe I think the growth is much more explosive in some of the scenes further south than in Hong Kong. And, but yeah, I mean, in 2012, I think it was a prescient prediction to say, 5-10 years from now, English language comedy is going to be a far greater cultural force in Asia than it is now.
Yeah.
I don't think I was wrong on that. I don't necessarily know if if some of the more shorter term predictions will ever pan out. But at that time, I mean, the clubs were growing, different promoters were coming into town. As much as I was promoting myself,
Coming into town, can you hear my kids?
Your kids coming into town, enjoying
They're coming home from school.
enjoying comedy.
I'm just checking the door's locked. There'll hear some banging soon.
But yeah, I mean, I tried to be instrumental in growing comedy as well, not just promoting it, but running my own shows and taking the Hong Kong brands to China.
I think you were in the right place. You are in the right place. You were in the right place at the right time. For me, my big time was the mid 1990s in Singapore, when they were opening up lots of shopping centres for shows and corporate dinners for some sort of variety show. And I arrived in Singapore, and there was no one else in the whole country who had a unicycle. So of course, I got bookings doing the standard climb on a big unicycle, juggle fire. And I was just in the right place at the right time. And I think about 2012, comedy was starting to boom in Asia.
Yeah,
And it's gone bigger. It's got bigger and bigger.
well, I think there's a
Still hard to make a full-time living though, even now in 2016.
Though some other parts of Asia where people maybe are bilingual, trilingual.
Yes.
In the Philippines, there's a number of guys that are making a full-time
Shout
living.
out to Gary Jackson, who's gone over there to set up a club.
Sure, absolutely. I went down and did some shows down there in the Philippines as well with the Comedy Manila guys, as well as with Gary. Kuala Lumpur is exploding. They got new clubs. Singapore. I mean, scenes like that where the larger segment of the population is speaking English. As the dominant language, I think the sky's the limit for those guys, because English comedy has a much broader ability to bring in huge crowds, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Hong Kong we're still kind of limited to Wan Chai, to Soho, right? Like
That's
you even
true.
you even bring your show over to TST over the harbor, and people are like, TST, I'm not going to TST to watch English comedy. It's like I can throw a ball to the neighborhood that we're going to go to, and that's too far away.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's really interesting, because I think Jami Gong has been really influential setting up his full-time takeout comedy club. But in a way, Hong Kong, there is a sort of a limit in Hong Kong to how big English-based stand-up comedy can be, because, like you say, only a tiny fraction of the people here speak English to a level where they'd really enjoy going to an English-speaking comedy club.
Sure, I mean, with the number of comics that are here, and with their ability to turn over their material quick enough to have somebody. I mean, if you come in to see a show, and then the next time you come see a show, the jokes are all the same still, then you might say, well, I'm gonna sit out for a couple of years, and maybe I'll come back and there'll be new stuff. I mean, I think the opportunity for international acts to come in, people come out and they get excited about that. I haven't seen that guy's material, right? I wouldn't, I did some hour-long shows in Hong Kong last year. I wouldn't come back this year and say, hey, come watch my new, it's like I don't have another hour within 9 months. So, I think part of that is being, having the foresight to understand how much return you're going to get on people coming in the door and saying, that's something I could do all the time, right? And what that's going to take is more comics. What that's going to take is more infrastructure to have the comics from the other scenes coming through town, right?
Yeah.
Like having headliners from overseas,
Yeah,
also having headliners from China.
Yeah,
or from,
I mean, you could in the foreseeable future maybe have a guy who is based in Hong Kong but makes a living as a stand-up comedian by flying around the region.
Sure, you go to Shanghai, you go to Beijing, you do all the different smaller China cities, you go to Seoul, then you go to KL, you go to Singapore. I mean, there's a circuit, and it hasn't been built yet, and people are working on building it, and I think, 10 years down the road, this may be a hilarious relic, this conversation.
It may be, I know.
Listen to them dreaming.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Right.
I tell you, Sean, every single skill I've learned, every single performing skill I've learned, I've somehow turned it into a money-making venture. That wasn't my aim, but I am a full-time professional entertainer. So when I learnt balloon twisting, of course that straight away went into shows. My first skill was juggling. That was straight away. Then I learnt unicycling. That went into the show. Balloon twisting's gone into the show. Everything I've learnt. So hopefully the stand-up comedy, even though I'm still not very good at it, hopefully by the time I'm good at it, there will be a way to make some money from it.
Perhaps, and I think it rewards in Asia in a time when the sort of industry isn't even here. It does reward a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit or somebody who's a little business minded about it. I mean, I can be fairly cynical from time to time about the artistry of comedy. I mean, if you want to make money in Hong Kong, you would be best to work on how corporate your style could be. I mean, the money's in corporate gigs, so if you're up there and every third word is a swear word and all your material's about sex and drugs, then, frankly, you're not going to be able to make the money of a guy who can put together a clean 20 minutes with no swearing.
Let's talk about the different stuff then. This is jumping in here. So, how do you corporate shows? How do you do with corporate shows? Bloomberg News, Sony. You've done stuff for them.
I've done more emceeing work than, I mean, for most of my time in Hong Kong, I wasn't able to get my comedy set to be completely clean. I mean, I like to be vulgar from time to time. I used to like to have kind of dirtier material. It's stuff that I'm trying to transition away from as a personal challenge. I mean, to me, what I find is funny, and when I'm at a comedy club, I know I'm surrounded by adults. I don't have to, I performed in front of families and kids for years. I prefer to be able to talk about what I want to talk about. So more of the work that I was getting through, the ones you mentioned, with help of some of the promoters around town hooking me up with those gigs, was doing MC. So more of the, I'm the compere of the evening. I'm giving some remarks that the CEO wants to have as a thing. I would do game show type stuff as well. So if they wanted to have lucky prize draw or games or auction off this or introduce the next act, I do that stuff, but I would certainly not throw in my bluer material or my dirtier jokes. So that was sort of a versatility kind of thing. If I had not had the experience of emceeing shows, I would not have been called and offered work like that because, they'd say, well, that guy's good at dirty jokes, but he's not good at cleaning up and putting a suit on and, and being professional.
Did you adjust your appearance, your costume? Did you wear a suit?
You dress up, you do that, you sell out, you dress up. That's all part of it, right? And I think, as I say, in Asia, I could at times be hard on people to say, tighten up your stuff, clean up your act, really challenge yourself to diversify your stuff. Not because, I'm being an asshole or I want them, I want to control what they're doing. It's more of, there's not a broad enough appeal and interest here in just somebody who's funny in nightclubs. There's no money in that yet, right? And there might be someday, and I'm not saying it's not worth working on, and certainly I love to, but
it's a very good point.
If you want to do this, because people would say, how can I get the bigger minutes? How can I travel? How can I get this corporate or that corporate? It's through not just having the same 7 minutes that requires you to swear 23 times. It's, go in there and host more shows and try to build your skill set so that when people think, oh, who could do this work for 15,000 Hong Kong dollars, they think of your name above, 10 other guys.
That's certainly something I was thinking about just the last few months. I've been trying to get a new set where I've cut out the Pacific Hong Kong and even more the Pacific mid-levels references in my set.
Right.
Because those references won't work more than 10 kilometers away from where I'm performing.
Well, I mean, for me, that was a big one because last year I decided I was going to tour around Asia, so I had to take out anything Hong Kong specific, and then I moved to Toronto and realized, well, goodness, anything Asia specific pretty well without, unless it's really broad, unless it's something that has sort of a global awareness, like something about China or Chinese politics, it's just not going to work back home. So if you have an idea that you're going to live in Shanghai for 3 years and then you're going to move back to LA and become a famous comic, well then you better start currently writing material that's going to go overseas to LA, because otherwise you're going to start from step one again, right? Like you're going to go back to an open mic and be like, well, what's funny about life in LA?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
They certainly don't care about my mid-levels joke, right? So, it's...
Mid-levels is a place in Hong Kong where lots of expats live.
Yeah, it's a moneyed paradise for the foreign colonial-minded expats.
Did you have any private events like an adult's birthday party or a wedding? Did you ever get any of those weird gigs?
I didn't.
Good.
I didn't thrive with too many private. Again, I really put a premium when I started doing comedy in Asia on trying to be as funny as I could as a nightclub comic, as a comedy club comic. And so for me, I think the corporates didn't come, fast and hard. And we did.
It's going to be hard to get corporates in Hong Kong because, again, most of the audience is not necessarily going to speak English as a first language, or even as any language sometimes. Right,
and they would have to be a Western firm, and they'd have to be sort of flying in, a global, a multinational
so again,
firm
it's not
that's
a
bringing
huge
people
market for English-speaking corporates. Yeah.
But it's there. The money's there. We did through Comedy HK. We did an event at it was an all Indian singles event.
Okay.
And they wanted comedy, I guess, and there was a host, and we had a couple acts, and then I was supposed to go on at the end and do 30, and it was clear from the very beginning that nobody the organizers booked us, but nobody attending the event wanted comedy. Who was interested in hearing comedy. It's a singles event. I don't want to, unless I'm going to date the comic, I don't really want to hear that guy talk for 30 minutes. I should go out and have a drink and talk to everybody else. And so in the end, I ended up running it as a game show. I came up, and instead of doing stand-up, I brought 3 single men and 3 single women out of the crowd, and we almost did like a dating game. Because
adaptability again, just like in your old days on the...
That's it. That was it's funny, because when I think about the corporates in Hong Kong, that's one that I'm most proud of, because it was funny, it was different, it wasn't just straight stand-up, but it was something that people were happy to pay for, that rewarded our ability to think on our feet and... and be versatile, and that was something we were proud. We walked away from that event with some money in our pockets, feeling like we worked for this, right? This was something that not just anybody could have come in and just hammered out. This was something that was unique to the skills that we brought to the event.
And fantastic.
And that's something that I think there's room to grow in Hong Kong for people that are going to be creative and want to sell something that's not just, hey, let me come in and make fun of your CEO for 10 minutes or whatever it is that people want to pay you to do in corporates in Hong Kong.
All right, here we come to what I call the randoms. Shall I play some music? Here we go. Randoms. Da-da-da-da.
Yeah, it's pretty random to just play music. So
no music. There's no music anywhere. Okay, let's pretend there was music. I'll switch that off. There we go. Okay.
It's been remarkable. This is a podcast about comedy that has never been funny once. Great job, Dan.
There we go.
We've really nailed it. We've really been pretentious enough to talk about the craft of comedy. We are wearing berets. I should mention that we've grown thin mustaches and are wearing berets and
smoking French cigarettes.
Yes, we've been sipping wine and smoking cigarettes the whole time.
Okay, we've talked about this one actually, so that's good. How to make money as an entertainer or a comedian in Hong Kong. How about in Toronto?
Similarly, in Toronto there's more infrastructure. I mean, that's a city with a very large, robust comedy scene, a ton of shows, oversaturated with shows, oversaturated with comics. There's full-time businesses that have been around for decades that promote comics, that get them on television, that kind of move you through the ranks. So making money in a scene like that requires time. I mean, you've got to get your name out there. You've got to be patient enough to know that if you're funny, it's going to take months, perhaps years for people to, again, think of you among a short list of people when they've got an opportunity and it's paid, to think, well, who would be good for this? Who do I want for this? And to put you on that list. So that takes time. Again, I'm quite entrepreneurial. The way that I'm trying to approach it in Hong Kong is I'm starting my own show. I mean, that's a way to kind of get your name out there.
You're trying to approach it in Hong Kong or in Toronto?
In Toronto,
yeah.
sorry, to start my own show. Similar to how I did it in Hong Kong, which was, if you want more stage time, if you want a larger platform to show the sorts of things that you can do on stage, then be your own boss. Start your own show. Find a bar, find a venue, approach it. Get a night, get a designer, make a poster.
So you're doing that?
Yeah, I'm launching a show next month.
Excellent.
It may not go. I mean, in Shenzhen, we used to run shows up in Shenzhen. I think we cycled through 4 venues before we found one that stuck. It took me over 2 years to find one that didn't die after the second or third time. It's something that takes patience. There's as much luck as there is skill, and you learn things along the road. But again, I've got a job. I have a day job in Toronto. I don't.
That's interesting. What's your day job?
I worked at a bar for a while. I just got a sales job. Again, it's if I work 9 to 5, that leaves my evenings out to run my own comedy business. But I know it's some people think that's not the romantic way. You're not struggling for your art. You're not the starving.
Oh, there's some comedy.
Nothing funny about Chumbawamba, Ben. Yeah, I'm not a huge believer in the starving artist thing, only because
that's a pretty amazing reference. You got that straight away, Chumbawamba.
Yeah.
Just by 2 bars.
Dude, I was a game show host. I'm quick. I require people to know things immediately. But no, I think that it takes a while to make money from something. So be patient, be smart about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to starve and be homeless just so I can tell jokes.
No, if you're doing stand-up comedy and that's mainly the evenings and the weekends. So yes, you can quite easily do a 9 to 5.
Of course.
Weekday job. Yeah.
I mean, if you have the luxury to do it, if you haven't put yourself in a situation where you need a second job in the night, or you're raising a family or traveling somewhere or wherever,
Yeah, you're not married, you haven't got kids.
I'm not married, I don't have kids.
Yeah, you still got
ladies.
You.
Yeah.
That girl in Macau. Yeah, if she's listening, he's back in Hong Kong.
I got one lady in Macau apparently.
Do you have any other skills that guitar playing? Music
playing? I used to play music when I was
has it ever
growing up
gone into your comedy act?
No, never. I never really liked musical comedy. Like I respect it, I appreciate it, Weird Al.
It's not your thing.
It's not my thing. I don't find I wouldn't write like humorous lyrics, or I kind of I think a few times I've done a punchline that involves singing or whatever, but I don't find it that funny, so I don't think it would ever come into my comedy.
Writing is obviously one of your skills. You've been a professional writer many times in your career.
I have, yeah.
And did it become slightly famous? Your stand-up comedy in Asia racist? I've read it.
Oh yeah.
NTR intersection NTRSCTN.
Intersection, yeah.
That was a great article.
Thanks. Yeah, I wrote an article last fall about just chatted with I traveled around Asia doing comedy for a long time and had many conversations with people both from the East and from the West about the penchant for people to talk about race on stage. Yeah. And obviously, different people's feelings about whether people were taking advantage of racist attitudes versus whether people were trying to be progressive or satirize, the focus on race. I mean, you go down to Singapore, a place where, the population's split pretty evenly between Malay and Indian and Chinese. And, I mean, it's like every day that's what they're faced with, that's the culture there. And so, of course, they're going to joke about it. But so many comics had expressed at different times, like, discomfort to me with certain people's sets or different jokes that they felt like, that's a joke that you could never take from Asia and bring to the U.S. or the U.K. I mean that you're using a stereotype to get a laugh, or you're or literally that's just racist. Like that guy went up and got a laugh from a joke that I thought was completely racist. Why did I get a laugh here when I think if you were in New York, people would have booed that joke off the stage? And I thought that was
very interesting. I thought that.
Well, yeah,
read it.
The website.
Read his article.
The intersection, NTRSCTN.com is a website that's about cultural convergence, and so they, I kind of pitched it to them as a here's a bunch of people from the West and the East who are living in Asia and talking about race and cultural convergence. And
I think one of your points is also that because the scene's quite new here, things will develop, and the simple stereotype jokes will maybe in a few years' time be old hat in the way that they are in the West. Because I think Western humour as well, earlier stand-up comedy in England, possibly in America, also had a lot of racial stereotypes. But they've developed out of it and they've gone beyond it. So who knows?
Sure, and I mean, let's be honest. Like I was one of the many people that found myself uncomfortable with certain things that I heard on stage, and I wasn't just writing it like I was the pure reporter. Obviously, I was the performer as well. I was up there on stages. I was sharing the stages with people, and I'm somebody that I hope, or I've tried, and I've certainly failed before, to challenge myself to not be lazy in my writing, or to kind of rely on cheap or easy stereotypes, or to not say something that 10 years from now I'd look at and be not proud of at all. And so, I wrote that knowing that some people would be offended by the piece, or they might think that I was attacking them. But I kind of had the thought
I don't think it was offensive, and I don't think you were attacking it.
I mean, if even one person stopped and read that piece,
if you read it all the way through,
read it all the way through, didn't just read the title and said, "Well, this if you read it all the way through and it made you stop at all and look back at your own material and think, how am I approaching the topic of race, then I think it was worth me writing. But I did take quite a bit of flack for it, obviously, because some people maybe rely on that type of material more than others. And
I'm as guilty as anybody. You just, thing is, you say something about the mainland Chinese, you get a huge laugh, you think, oh, well, I better say that again in the next set.
Right, and I've seen people do race material in Asia that was smart and that was clever, that took a stereotype and spun it on its head, and I've seen people that have done stuff that I thought, well, good Lord, if that was, if that was done in the 50s, I think that joke would have been, exactly the same. That's like a Mickey Rooney and Breakfast at Tiffany's style,
So I guess aim to take it as a starting point, racial stereotype humor, but aim to get better and better and better.
That's, from my pretentious, idealistic, comedic perspective, that's what I would like to try to do for my own self, and maybe I was, putting out a subtle challenge to others to raise their game, but,
I think it's a very influential article in the history of stand-up comedy in Asia. I think your article will go down as a very interesting, influential piece. More of the randoms. You may not have a quick one off the top of your head, but if we can come back to it. What was your best gig ever? Is there something that stands out? Any that's really stand out in your mind?
Best gig ever. I had a show where I did a show in Shanghai one time at an Irish pub, and they really packed it. They'd never done a comedy show there. It was through Kung Fu Comedy, and this great comic from Shanghai, American guy named Paul Johnson was hosting. Fantastic comic. Audrey Murray was the opener. She's based out of New York now, but she used to be a Kung Fu Comedy comic. And I was being given the supreme privilege of being the headliner and getting to do an hour. And just from start to finish, it was such a phenomenal show. Like I'll dust off my shoulder. I was on that night. Me and the crowd were kind of on the same wavelength.
Fantastic.
Sometimes I'm feeling good and they're not. They don't like me or whatever. But that night, it all just kind of came together, and I've been working really hard for a couple of years and had built the material up. And that night, I just remember.
You did an hour.
I think it was the first time I'd done like a full hour where I was the only one billed on the show, and I was immensely proud of the accomplishment. That was the first time I'd done it. And
How did you work up for an hour? Because most of the sets we get in Hong Kong are like 7 or 8 minutes. How did you turn that to an hour?
My first step was I started planning shows up in China, up in Shenzhen and Guangzhou, just because I was aware that I would never get the opportunity necessarily to do that amount of time unless I was my booker, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing was that we didn't have much opportunity in Hong Kong to do time like that, 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You have to build it. First it's 7, then it's 10, then it's 12, then it's 15, then it's 20, then it's 30. And each stage you have to learn a new set of skills to keep the audience's attention for that amount of time. And I had the great opportunity through Takeout Comedy and Comedy HK take some professional comics from the UK and Australia and the US for beers and ask them, how do you turn 5 minutes into 45 minutes? How, what skills do you need to do?
I was exactly going to ask that, because there aren't any local guys in our set who do it now. We all get 7 or 8 minutes, so you were able to ask the visiting comics.
Of course, and I was able to, as the promoter of those shows up in China, I was able to book, great comics like Jim Brewski and Ryan Hynek and Darren Chu and Tambi Chan, and some of these guys were able to come up to China and do 30 minutes on our show.
When were you doing these shows? In 2013?
2014? Mostly 2014, 2015,
Brilliant.
I think. Yeah. And we only did a couple up in Guangzhou, but I did a bunch in Shenzhen, and kind of tried to just get it to click there. And those were, to me, that was like going to the gym. It was like I got to go up and would do a 20 or a 25 or a 30, and started to learn how to do longer form stories. I'd go to open mics and ask to host, and would try out a 10-minute story that I'd written up. Comic Andre King would come in from New Zealand, a fantastic comic from New Zealand, and he would give us comedy classes where he'd let me sit down with him and go through his hour set and say, how do you give the audience a break? How do you know when to lean on the gas pedal, or how do you know when to let up? I worked hard on crowd work so that if the crowd started getting tired, I could switch gears and kind of use different skill sets.
Basically, you put a lot of work and effort into it.
It was a goal. It was a goal of mine to try to learn how to build a longer set.
Yeah.
And again, it was, I had to just try to work on different skills. That was all. That was always my goal, was to not be a one-trick pony, like to go in and, I'm a one-liner guy. All I do is one-liner. So that's perfect. And if that's your thing, it's your thing. But to me, I figured, I can't scream at a crowd for 45 minutes and A, keep my voice, and B, keep them interested. So I thought, if I'm, whatever I'm worst at, I should try at the next open mic. And so It was just a little bit of, I take a bit of a workman's approach to art. Again, it's like it's not a romantic notion of art. I see it as a skill that you learn, just as, I see amazing people that are incredibly funny just by going up there, and that's not me. I work at it, I have to put effort.
Despite all your hard work, you must have had some very bad gigs or weirdest gigs. Is there anything that stands out? Not necessarily bad, could be weird, or anything unusual? Bad, weird, unusual? We can come back to it.
Pretty awful.
Funny stories?
We did some shows in the Philippines a few times that were... we did a show in a brothel for former U.S. soldiers and their prostitutes. Though I'm not necessarily proud of the... Again, versatile, building skills, doing crowd work with men that have paid for their women to be on their arm. I remember turning to one of my fellow comics on the show, and he said, I don't even want to make these people laugh. This is, it's like that's a pretty unique to Asia experience, perhaps. And I had no idea what I was stepping into when I booked the gig. And that was certainly an experience.
When you booked the gig, how did you go about booking these things? Did you approach people in hotels or bars and say, "Hey, I'd like to do a show"?
I didn't book any of the stuff overseas. That was all through different comics around the scene that had maybe a friend who ran a bar or runs a hotel or whatever, or the Comedy Manila guys. They were running a show and they offered to fly me in to host or whatnot. For myself, if I want to run my own show, then it's find the venue, find the person, see if they can get on board, and then put together a press release, make a poster, find somebody who knows how to do that, set a price, promote it. It's an imperfect art. We've done shows for 3 people. You want to talk about worst shows. We used to do shows down at Takeout where there all the time more comics than there are audience members.
Remember those shows we used to get? Was it the Liquid Room in Lan Kwai Fong? Did you?
Yeah.
2 people watching.
Oh yeah, we did a show at Rula Bula one time where we had 2 people, and bless his heart, Jami Gong would say, "You got a crowd, do the show." Some people might have said, "Screw it, we cancel the show," but there's if you look at it as just like, man, this is my nightmare, then fine. But if you look at it and say, okay, there might be something I could learn from this.
Yeah.
Could I learn to not lose my momentum and focus on stage and just focus in on the two people I'm performing at and act as though I'm crushing in front of 500 people, even though I'm only performing for two people that are barely paying attention to what I'm saying? That's good practice, right?
Yeah,
like figure out what the thing is you might be able to learn from that experience. And man, in Asia, it's comedy boot camp. Like, we went through some of the worst stuff I could imagine out here, and I'm sure I'm better off for it.
Another quick one: TV and movie work. Have you ever had any of those ones?
Definitely not a movie. Though I hear there's a documentary that. Chad Daniels, Tom Segura, and Pete Lee, three fantastic U.S. comics. They had a documentary crew with them last year when they came out to Asia, and they did Macau, they did Hong Kong, and they did Shanghai or Singapore, I can't remember now. And I was lucky enough to host the gig, the final night of their tour at the MGM Macau. And I just had lunch with Chad Daniels a week and a half ago when he was in Toronto, and he said that a couple of my bits made the movie.
Woo!
So bam!
Yeah,
if that movie ever sees the light of day, makes it on Netflix, I could claim to have been in a movie, but probably not.
On stage and off stage persona, the same? Similar? Exaggerated?
I mean, exaggerated. It's, again, a laugh a minute here, sitting in the, I wouldn't say I'm the funniest person. It's like every comedian knows somebody that's naturally 100 times funnier than them, like a true character, somebody that every time you see them, they're off the wall, hilarious, they're energetic.
Yeah.
If I'm putting on a suit and going into a day job, I can't be screaming at people and
also
swearing and doing dirty jokes. I used to be a kindergarten teacher. I can monitor my personality pretty well, but I mean, my stage persona it's not a character. It's mostly an exaggeration of me perhaps at my truest, most vocal, most outraged self.
Marketing yourself. Any particular tips or things you've learned along the way?
I don't know.
I've tried everything: YouTube, Facebook.
Yeah,
I just do everything.
I think I'm awful at it. I think I don't know how to do Twitter, Facebook. I'm not sure
I see what the best way is, from my opinion. Do a good show, and if it's a show where you're allowed to give up your own name card, give up your name card.
Sure, I'm a believer in professionalism around the venue. Shake hands as people leave the club. Be polite. If somebody comes up to you after and compliments you, say thank you so much. Don't refuse the compliment. Thank them for coming to the show. Tell them, when your next show might be. I try to do, if somebody books you on a show, I thank them and send them a follow-up email. I try to be professional with that sort of stuff. I don't know how to promote myself. I'm not good with social media. I'm not sure how to make my presence online larger, grander. I'm sure I rub people the wrong way all the time. I'm sure I shoot myself in the foot more often than I do a good job promoting myself.
But
if anybody knows how to market themselves in comedy,
both my listeners will be listening to you now. Both my listeners around the
Go
world.
on podcasts and don't be funny. That's the way. That's the way to do it.
Do you still get stage fright?
I put pressure on myself, but I'm not afraid of performing. I mean, again, it was something that I was kind of attracted to and addicted to my whole life. I get excited and I get enthused and energetic when I go up, but I don't really get, I don't get fright so much. Like I don't get nerves.
Okay.
It's more just me putting a lot of expectations on myself. If it's a big opportunity, I want to do well, and so I sort of psych myself up for those sorts of things.
Well, the last few questions now as we go in for the close
Home
here.
stretch.
How do you see your future? Have you any particular plans? Any direction you're aiming for? Or are you just keeping your options open and just pushing as hard as you can?
If I love doing comedy, I don't have necessarily. If I'm not a pro comic by the time if I can keep doing comedy and whether it's a hobby or whether somebody pays me to do it, if I could continue to be around funny people and get to do shows, with people I admire and think are incredible at the craft, and that's good enough for me. I just hope that I can keep doing it. You know, it's something that I don't want to make it a job. You know, I would never want to continue to do comedy if I was getting up on a stage and I thought, geez, this is not something I want to do today. So yeah, sure.
There we are. Sean Hebert, absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
This is Big Ben talking to Sean Hebert.
This was an absolute pleasure to,
there we go.
To join you in your home, surrounded by all of your weird pornography. But I really appreciate it, Ben. Thank you. It's great to be back in Hong Kong. I've seen you do some comedy this week. That was awesome.
Cheers, Sean.